resilience is really about being open to learning and taking in new information so that we can actually step out of our whole old habitual ways of being.
So I'm so excited that you are back with us today. You always have such valuable insights. In 2017, you wrote The Craving Mind, from cigarettes to smartphones to love, why we get hooked and how we can break bad habits, which I think that title alone resonates with so many people, quite honestly. But what was going on in the world that made you want to write this then?
Well, we've been having this growing, epidemic of addictions, basically, and everything from social media to a very strong emphasis on, everyone going viral, whether it's on Twitter or YouTube or Instagram or whatever, that pressure's just been building and building and building over the last couple of years. So it really felt like this book was needed when we're addicted to everything from opioids to romantic love to going viral on Instagram.
You do have one chapter in your book called Training Resilience. And I'm wondering, what do you mean by training?
Yes, well, I think it's something, if we understand how our minds work, we can start to work with our minds and we can train our minds that way. And resilience is something really that can be trained. I think if we understand what it is, what leads to us being less resilient, and then what the conditions are that we can create that helps us build resilience, it's something that we can train.
Resilience is one of these things that I personally feel is a quality that allows someone to make it or break it. Now, that's my personal opinion, and I think everybody has different opinions about what makes someone successful. But I think resilience is one of those qualities that I often find myself, I think I do okay, but even more would be even better.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And I think the idea that you can even train yourself to be resilient is maybe something I never thought of before. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, this is a little off topic, but do people actually even understand that this is a trainable thing? Or is that really what you're trying to let people know that really has not been known before?
I haven't seen it out there a lot. So I would say, that's why I included it as a chapter in the book that, we can really train this thing, and it starts with just understanding, what actually leads us to not be resilient, So if you think of resilience as, I like the simple definition of elasticity, where we can bounce back from things. Mm-hmm. If you think about it, everything from anxiety to, the worries about the future to uncertainty, all of that stuff can start to feel very, very heavy and very weighty, where we feel like we've got the weight of the world on our shoulders, whether it's, trying to help our children navigate school or,
right.
or just safety for our families, with regard to, the pandemics or anything like this. There's tons of stuff that's really uncertain. And any one piece might feel like, okay, this isn't that heavy, but as we add it all together, that starts to get really, really heavy. And then as the weight, of the world, so to speak, or feels like it's really heavy, it's harder to bounce back. And so, as we carry this stuff around on our shoulders, it makes us less resilient.
The chapter actually starts with a parable of two monks, which I'm really interested in this, and the idea of ethical circumstantial decision making. So what's that story? Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's a great old story. So the idea is, monks and nuns take these vows, and for example, with monks, in some traditions, it's around not touching women, for example. And so these two monks they're walking along a path. They come up to a river. The river's, tough to cross. And so they're about to cross. This woman comes up and says, I can't cross this river by myself. So the old monk picks her up, carries her across the river, sets her down on the other side, and keeps walking. The young monk, he quickly crosses the river, catches up with the old monk. They're walking along, and the young monk, you can just see the smoke coming out of his ears. He's like, you broke, he's thinking like, you broke your vows. I can't believe, oh my God, you're such a bad monk.
Yeah, right. Right.
And so they get down the path far enough, and the young monk finally just explodes and, unloads on the old guy and says, I can't believe you did. Blah, blah, blah. And the old guy says, well, I clearly put her down, a long time ago, but you're still carrying her around. So that's the idea, is that, just these mental things, the idea of taking a vow is, it's geared toward helping somebody help, develop kindness and help other people. And so, so from an ethical standpoint, this old guy, he's like, okay, somebody needs help. I'm going to help this person out, and puts it down. Whereas this young guy, he's just ruminating on this thing, and that's what actually builds up his weight on, to the point where he can't shoulder that burden anymore. So there's a great example of elasticity, working with what is and working with the current circumstances, knowing what your guide is, like what your guiding light is, as compared to somebody that's like taking something as dogma or codified and then making that become, a thing when it doesn't have to be a thing.
That's so interesting. So now I really want to know this circumstantial decision-making concept is fascinating. I want to know what you think about how that applies to the world that we're living in, which includes unemployment, a pandemic, trying to find a vaccine, kids and schools, and even like the thought of our future lives, right? Are couples going to actually be able to have a wedding celebration in the next couple of years? Are graduations going to be held? So how does that concept apply to this state of uncertainty that we're living in now?
Yeah, well, if you take this even from the lens of resilience, we can look to see what is it that is weighing me down. And a lot of this has to do with how far out we're projecting into the future, and how much we're worried and afraid of, and, making decisions based on these fear things. You can see how heavy those weights are. Oh no, am I going to be able to have a wedding in a year? Well, the world is changing pretty rapidly. So the true answer is who knows, right? And so if you look at it as somebody starts, oh no, my wedding, and then they just pile on worry after worry after worry. That's like that young monk, just stacking themselves up with worries. So, or they could take it, like this resilient old monk, and they say, oh, well, I don't know what's gonna happen in a year. What do I need to do right now? What do I need to do today? So how we can apply this right now is, how much are we starting to spin out into the future? How heavy does that feel, as compared to where do we have enough information to make decisions right now so that we can make the best decisions that we can right now? And we can also be elastic. Okay, I made a decision, this is what the consequence was. I can learn from that instead of beating myself up over, oh, that was a terrible decision, because things change all the time. So as we can remember, things are constantly changing. We can learn to be resilient through all of this, and be elastic as we're bumping around, because nobody really has a good roadmap for what to do next.
And I that's such a good point, right? Nobody has a good roadmap. Even the scientists, they're trying to put together a roadmap for us, but even they talk with uncertainty. Nothing is certain. And I think that's probably the scariest thing about this, is that we can't definitively say, oh, at this time, at this date, in the future, et cetera. And it's probably maybe the first time I feel like I've ever been like this. I can't say when I'm going to get on the plane next. I have no idea. I don't know when I'm going to be able to say I can get on the plane next. And so many things, right? Like, isn't that like, it kind of like, I'm kind of like, it makes me a little, a little jittery, because it's not even just doing things. It's the fact that there's this uncertainty about it. You can't even with certain say you can do anything.
Right.
So yeah.
Although there is one certainty. Okay. So the only certain thing is uncertainty. Right.
Well, yes, that's
but
true.
as you're talking about this, we can say, okay, where can I be elastic, and where can I be resilient around what I need to do right now, as we keep things close, as we make decisions today. And we can look to see, what does that feel like? Okay, I'm going to make a decision now as far as I need to. And what does it feel like to let go of the stuff that I don't have control over? So what's that like as you kind of chew on that, in terms of even getting on a plane?
Yeah, I'm gonna chew on that for a little bit. And again, I always love talking to you because it feels like a personal therapy session. But I kind of think, oh, when am I going to go on a date again? Gosh, would that be 2023? Would we look at 2024? I mean, there's so many things. But I have to say that in this new world, this idea of taking what you just said and me saying, okay, you don't know when you're actually going to be able to go on a date again. So let's figure out how to use Zoom. Okay, let's get really good at FaceTime. And I do think, obviously, you're the expert, but I do see how it's almost like releasing. It's almost like releasing control and saying, you know what, I don't know. So let's work with what I have.
Well, you bring up something really interesting. As we let go, right? So think of holding on to something really tightly, something that we don't actually have control over. The likelihood that we're actually going to make that mark is pretty low, right?
Right.
But as we
Right.
start to let go, that opens up possibilities. So we're likely
Mm,
to not only be open to new things, but we're going to be aware, oh, how can I be open to seeing new possibilities, something different? And it's a great condition for allowing us to be creative. Oh, okay, let's be creative here. Where can we look beyond our horizons? Where can we look that we've never looked before? It's an opportunity to actually
it
open
is
up
an
and
opportunity.
grow, because we
That's
can say,
true.
okay, we've got to be creative here. Let's go for that.
And I'll just say this, like medicine, look at medicine, even as an example, couldn't see patients in the office, right? Had to shut that down. So literally with the leadership of my department, not my leadership, but the leadership of our department, we went to telemedicine. Like, honestly, I had always, it's not that I had a negative view about telemedicine, but I was always like, I don't know if you can see patients through the phone. I don't know. And all of a sudden I am like telemedicine queen. I'm like, hello, how can I help you? And it's totally opened my mind about really what's possible. And I now know obviously that there are a lot of benefits to telemedicine. So anyway, Judd, thank you for that and reminding us that when we release sort of our rigidity about certainty, it sometimes allows us to be more creative. I'm still going to work on the dating stuff, the creativity with that. I'll give you an update on that.
Please do.
Okay, so let's talk about paying attention to our habits. So you write in your book that paying attention to our habits allows us to break our habits, which is so interesting as a concept. I think that's a little bit hard to fathom for a lot of people in the abstract, or maybe it's simply difficult to do. Now, last time we talked about my Pop-Tart obsession, right? And I have to be honest with you, I was like, you have to stop buying Pop-Tarts. But I'll be part of the hardest part, and I think the most almost shameful part was actually acknowledging to myself that I ate way too many Pop-Tarts. It's
Mhm.
not pleasant to do. So
Mhm.
what do you say about that?
Well, that's the key to changing behavior, is really paying attention to what the
Yeah,
results are. So let me ask you,
yeah.
you're more personal
You're like,
therapy, right?
just do it anyway. Just do it.
Right.
Make it
So
happen.
what's it feel like when you don't, so I've literally had, I don't know how many patients say, I eat the whole ice cream thing and then I dig up the garbage in the garbage can and I put it at the very bottom so that the rest of the family can't see that I just did that. Right. So there's this shame thing where they just don't want to acknowledge what they just did. But that's
Right.
exactly what they need to do, is pay attention to the behavior. What did they just do?
Yeah, it's shame. I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed because I can eat a box of Pop-Tarts and not even think twice about it. But yeah, it's too much sugar. It's not healthy. I'm a doctor. I'm supposed to be, modeling good behavior. I'm supposed to be giving people, health and nutrition advice. And yeah, no, it feels shameful.
Yeah, so take that piece, now add to it. How does it feel when you eat healthy food versus your box of Pop-Tarts? Which one feels better,
I'm
just
proud. I
physically?
feel proud. Oh, yeah, well, no, okay. Yes, the vegetables feel better, but honestly, I get so much joy from
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
that's probably not the right answer, but yes, I do feel better physically and mentally, which I think is a big part of the physical aspect for me
yeah.
too.
Okay,
So
so let's unpack this, because there's actually, so this isn't about demonizing Pop-Tarts, right? But this is
right.
about looking at this cause and effect relationship. So when I eat a whole box of Pop-Tarts, it might feel different than if I have a Pop-Tart and actually truly enjoy it. But the key there is paying attention. So when you, and
Right.
I actually had a friend, Dana Small, she's a food researcher at Yale, where she put people in a PET scanner and she scanned their brains as she fed them chocolate. So, and then she said, how good is this? And she fed them their favorite chocolate. They're like, this is great. I'm getting paid to eat chocolate. And
Yeah.
then as they ate chocolate, it went from good, awesome, to like, stop, this is awful, this is horrible. But she
Mm.
was forcing them to pay attention as part of the experiment. They had to tell her, how good is this? So your mission, should you choose to accept it, is like, as you eat the Pop-Tarts, right? Eat a Pop-Tart each bite and ask yourself, okay, how little is enough? Is this bite enough? And where does that plateau happen in terms of joy, the Pop-Tart joy? And where does it start to tank in terms of like,
Yeah.
I really didn't need that last bite. It didn't actually make this more
Right.
satisfying.
Right.
Guaranteed that it will go off the edge. And if you don't pay attention, it'll happen exactly as you described it. One box,
Hmm.
two box, three boxes. The grocery store's like, oh, here's the Pop-Tart lady coming
They're
back for
like, oh, there she
more.
comes. Right. She'll be
Better
back
make
next
sure we're
week.
stocked. Yeah. So if you pay attention, it doesn't mean that you can't enjoy a Pop-Tart, but as you pay attention, you can start to say, oh, I ate one Pop-Tart. It was enjoyable. It was fine. And it felt good to stop there when I was actually
Yeah.
satisfied.
Let's talk about like the world we live in today, right? Because it's maybe not that we need to break a habit or have broken habits, but the world around us has changed. So in some ways, for some of us, the world has broken some habits for us, whether we liked it or not, whether we asked for it or not, whether we want it or not. What does this do to how or what we pay attention to? And maybe this goes back to the control thing and the uncertainty thing, but now the kind of the world is in control. So for better or for worse, some of our habits have been broken for us.
Yeah, so let's talk about for worse first, because we've also heard of the quarantine 15, right?
Yes.
So I don't know if anybody else has, is like developed a donut habit, but certainly people are working from home a lot more now, and so that refrigerator is right there. It's that siren call saying, "Come to me," that type of thing. And they're not at work, and so it's not like the coworker like looking at them like, "You're going to the refrigerator again." It's like all they have is the mirror to look at. And so we're developing these bad habits, and some of this has to do with uncertainty. So uncertainty is unpleasant, and so we can make that feel better by distracting ourselves. We go into the kitchen, we're like, I don't know what I want, but I want something. And it's just that brain saying, I want you to feel better. And so we eat a donut and we feel a little bit better, and we forget what it was for a little while. And then we go back and eat another one. But we're also seeing this with social media. Uncertainty is, think of information as a type of food for our brain, right? So the more information we have, the more we can plan for the future to survive, right? So that's really how our brains are set up for learning, is like, take past experience, project it into the future, and then take the information that you have right now so that you can plan for the future. But if we don't have information, right, so much is up in the air right now. We don't have that information, that spins out into worry. And so we go on social media thinking we're going to get like up-to-date information, right? So that we start scroll, looking for good information. Well, guess what people are doing? They're just panicking right there next to us saying, I need information. Oh no, oh no, oh no. And then suddenly, people are sneezing on our brains with that social contagion of fear and their own anxiety and their own worry, that where we've gone to get information, it's actually just getting us, one, addicted to going on social media, because every now and then we'll get that hit of like a news, breaking news story. But the rest of the time, we're just like distracting ourselves, or, getting fed with more anxiety.
That's crazy. And that's really real life, right? Because so many people have had to, people we know say, I'm going to take a break from social media. I'm going to log off for a while, guys. I'm going to take a tech break. And I think it's good that people are doing that, but I think we can all relate to that feeling of fear, compounding fear, and so many other things. I want to skip a little ahead I want to stay on the topic of breaking habits, because that is a habit, the idea of scrolling or reflexively scrolling or scrolling impulsively when we have a fear or a this or that, looking for information, feeding our brain, perhaps, as you described. So when it comes to trying to break a habit, you point out that it's often where we see or understand more fully how automatic something can become. And I especially think of like, automaticness, whatever the word is for that, but especially with scrolling and stuff. Can you explain that concept?
Well, so I think you might have even just given a good description of it. This is where, when the Pop-Tart goes in and there's no conscious awareness of it, and the conscious awareness like starts to open up when we're like, how did the box get empty? The Pop-Tart thief came again. So that's what the automaticity is about, is like we wake up afterwards, whether it's the scrolling or the eating or the, checking our newsfeed or whatever. That's the piece that actually starts to break the cycle, is just waking up first and seeing, oh, I am actually in a habit loop. I'm in a cycle. If we don't see it, we're going to keep scrolling. We're going to keep eating.
Interesting. Now, what is habitual hardening? You talk about that. So what is that?
Yeah, so think of this as just like grooving these pathways over and over and over to the point where they just get really, really deep. Think of when the wagon trains went across the US, and they went in the same ruts over and over and over. Some of those ruts stuck around, I want to say for like 100 years or something, some ridiculous amount of time. Yeah, where these things were so entrenched in the earth that, they really stuck around. So that's what happens to our brain. The more we repeat a behavior, the more it gets grooved. For example, I had a patient who came in, he'd been smoking for 40 years. He'd grooved that smoking pathway roughly 293,000 times, right? Every time he smoked a cigarette.
what do habits, some of which we've talked about, and breaking habits, things like that, but what do habits, stressors, circumstantial decision making, what do those things have to do with resilience? Pull this all together for me.
Right. So you can think of a habit as being we're not resilient, right? So the more we groove something,
Okay.
so let's take a view. Like, let's say that we're attached to a view. It could be a political view, it could be an environmental view, it could be a mass squaring view. Just think of all the views that people so easily get attached to, right? The more attached we are to a particular view, the less resilient we are, right? So somebody says,
Mm-hmm.
"Hey, have you thought about this?" Our automatic response is no, right? No,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm really attached to how I see the world. So that's a lack of resilience. That's where we're very rigid, right? And that's
Mm-hmm.
really problematic, because we can't, the more rigid we are with anything, any type of view, any type of behavior, the harder it is to change that. And
Mm-hmm.
the harder it is to actually survive, because we're not going to actually be working with this ever-changing nature of reality, right? Because the world is constantly changing, so we can't update our views. So think of it that way. The more the more locked in we are to a particular habit or a view, the harder it is to actually take in new information, update what we know, which is actually there to help us survive. Like, so it's very interesting. Even if you look at the mask wearing thing, at the early bit of the pandemic, nobody knew, was mask wearing helpful or not, right?
Yeah.
Did a bunch of studies, and then pretty definitively, wearing a mask really helps prevent the transmission of coronavirus, for example, right? So
Right.
here, if everybody said, okay, well, we don't know, let's do the studies and see, let's wait and see. Imagine if everybody was resilient and said, okay, I'm going to be open-minded and wait to see what the science says. And then when enough studies come out and it's definitive, everybody's like, oh, here's new information. Let's take that information. Let's use that to help us all survive, as compared to, what happened, where it just became a politicized thing, and science went out
Right.
the window. So there's an
Right.
example of not resistance, right? So resistance to new information. And there's also an example of where we could all be resilient and say, oh, let's take the available information. It might even change over time, but let's be open to this. And the more we do that, and the more we learn that resilience actually feels good, right? Because,
Yeah. Yeah.
I can adapt. Adaptation is a good thing. The
Yeah.
easier it is to not get stuck in these old, in any new habit, right? So we might
Sure.
notice we're paying attention. Oh, I'm going to the refrigerator more. It's not that helpful. Oh,
Right.
wow, my Poptart credit card bill is oh, maybe not that helpful. Whatever it is, we can start to say, oh, let me roll with this. What can I do? What can I learn from this so that I can grow?
Right. You've talked about untraining our minds when it comes to habits, beliefs, good or bad.
Mm-hmm.
You just now talked about the importance of resilience and how some of the other stressors and things like that play a role. Can you help me understand what the difference is, if there is one?
Yeah, so I think of physical, like with weight training, for example, the idea is resistance training, right? So we lift weights against the resistance of gravity, right? And the
Right.
more weight we can lift, the stronger our muscles get. So that's how we've often been trained, is this heuristic around, oh, you got to push, you got to force, you got to do, that's how you change habits. Well, in reality, that's really good for building muscle mass, but it's not actually good for changing habitual behavior. So I actually flip that on its head and say, this is about unresistance training, right? So the more we resist an idea, the less we're going to be open to that. But the more we can unresist, as in get curious, the more we can say, oh, that's new information. Let me see if I can take that in. I think of that as unresistance training, in the sense that the way that we train our minds is through being open. The way we train our muscles is through resistance. So the two, the two are they're just very specific to their own modality of training. Does that make sense?
Got it. It does, and it's unresistance training. That's what that's the phrase, and that makes it's kind of like giving in and just accepting this sort of not fighting it, whatever it is, but being accepting of it and saying, okay, well, let me try it, or let me, being open, perhaps.
I think that's a really nice way of putting it, being open to what is. which opens us up. It comes to Carol Dweck's definitions of growth versus fixed mindset. So fixed mindset is when we resist what's happening. Growth mindset is when we're open. And like you're saying, we accept, okay, here's the reality. How can I lean into this and learn from it?
Right, right. I want to switch gears just a little bit and talk about empathy. Because when I think about empathy, I think about what our world has been through in the last so many months and what we're going to still be going through for a long time, how our individual worlds have flipped upside down, how the collective world has been flipped upside down. And I think so many of us feel empathy towards others. Is it possible to be fatigued from empathy? Is it possible to have and give too much empathy?
Yeah, I think doctors are a really good example of this, but this goes way beyond physicians. So if you think of, and there's this term that wasn't around when I was in medical school. I don't know if it was when you were in medical school, around empathy fatigue. So there's been a lot of research showing that physicians get burnt out at epidemic rates right now, and this was
Right,
even BC before coronavirus, right? And I'm sure
right,
it's even
right.
worse now. So the idea is with empathy is, you walk in somebody's shoes, and if you can put yourself in somebody's shoes, you can relate to where they're coming from. So I think it's
Hmm.
really helpful, for example, for white people to put themselves in the shoes of people of color so they can see what microaggressions are like, so they can see, what it's like on an everyday basis. And they're like, oh, this is
Right,
really bad. Like we need to
right,
change things, right? But
right.
if we take things personally, that's where empathy can start to get fatigued. So for example, if you and I take
Ah,
the weight of our patients' suffering, right? Our patients come to us because they're sick. They don't come to us because they're healthy, unless it's a well visit or
right.
something like that. So if we take that weight on and we're working, 40, 60, whatever, 80 hours a week, that's a lot of suffering that we're taking on, where it weighs us down, right? So we start to get the weight of the world on our shoulders, and then surprise, we get burnt out. So the
Right.
key here is to be able to step in somebody's shoes, but not take it personally. So the way I think of this is flipping this from empathy. So we still need to be able to be with that suffering, but not take it personally. So we flip from empathy to compassion. So compasio literally means to suffer with. So we're
Mm,
still with that. We're still in somebody's shoes, but we're not taking that personally. So when we take suffering personally, it's painful, and our natural reaction is to push it away, to protect ourselves. So this is where we, become callous, we depersonalize, we do all this stuff that's naturally, self-protective. But if
mhm.
we're not worrying about ourselves because we're not taking this on personally, then we can be with as much suffering as there is. And the beauty of that is so you tell me, what naturally arises when you see somebody suffering? What do you naturally want to do?
Help.
And we
Right.
have all this energy to help because we're not worried about taking things personally. So the more we can
Mm,
learn to notice the difference between when we're taking something personally and when we're able to not distance ourselves, but notice what it's like to take things personally, let go of that piece, still be with the suffering, then that compassion can shine forward, and we
mm,
don't get stuck in empathy and empathy fatigue. And of course, this is
mm,
where, my lab's been studying this a lot. This is where mindfulness training comes in. So we can
mhm.
train physicians to become mindful. And there are studies out of University of Rochester. My lab just published a study with app-based mindfulness training program where we actually got a 50% reduction in certain aspects of physician burnout simply by
Wow.
teaching them mindfulness. So, there's
Wow.
even good scientific evidence behind awareness helping people shift from empathy to compassion, and really it's allowing that compassion to naturally shine forth and just not get caught in the empathy fatigue trap.
Just before we close, I want to go back to resilience because this is a topic that, again, I want to just focus on moving forward and resilience today and resilience now. 2020 has been near impossible for so many of us, right? For
Mm-hmm.
different reasons: uncertainty, breaking of habits, good, bad, the world breaking our own habits, whether we ask for them or not, unemployment, sickness, protests. So, how do we apply resilience to a year? And you've spoken a little bit to this, but I wanted to ask discreetly: how do we apply resilience to a year that's been largely burdensome for so many people?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So here I would say it starts with really, some self-reflection and really seeing, well, first just understanding what the concept of resilience is. It's about this elasticity. And if we can
Right.
understand the concept, then we can start to apply it immediately in our lives. where am I rigid? Where am I resisting something? Where am I pushing back instead of opening up? Where am I creating barriers? Where am I creating, us versus them versus all of
Mm-hmm.
us together, right? So the us
Mm-hmm.
versus them is resistance. We're all in this together is resilience. Like how can we all work together? How can we be creative? So I think as we just understand that simple concept, we can start to immediately see all the places where we are not resilient, where we are actually resisting in the world.
Right.
And then we can just start to bring awareness to that and ask ourselves, how's that going? Is that
Right.
working? And no matter
Sure.
where we are, we can step back and say, okay, is this helping me? Is this helping everybody else? Or is this actually taking a lot of energy, causing confusion, causing divisiveness, right? And those
Mm-hmm.
things will be those outcomes that will tell us, hey, and help us set us and say, okay, this is working, great, keep going. And truly working, like not with blinders on, but really paying
Right.
attention. And if it's
Right. Right.
not
Right.
working, we can step back. And if it is
Mm-hmm.
working, like, oh, what's it feel like to work together? What's it like to open to new
Mm-hmm.
ideas? What's it like to, rest in the uncertainty of not knowing? Oh,
Sure.
okay, I can do this. The more we do that, the more it feels good. And the more that will naturally groove in our brains.
Interesting. And along those lines, I mean, I think a big thing that you've just talked about, you've been talking about through this whole session is, I guess, maybe the concept of being rigid or sort of fighting against, right? Um, what are some other factors that impede resilience, say, besides that one? I mean, I can imagine that's probably a main one. We fight against change and openness, but are there other factors as well that fight against resilience?
Well, I would say
Make
one
it
that we're
hard?
Yeah, I would say one that we're seeing today is just there's this, we have such a animal instinct toward, think of it as tribal psychology, which was
Mm,
set up as a survival mechanism, right? Well, if there's this tribe over there, we don't know if they're going to come and, give us food and work with us or come and attack us, right? So there are these very core mechanisms that we just automatically revert to without even paying attention. So the other thing I would say is look to see where we are enacting some type of tribal psychology in terms of us them,
mm,
right? And
okay.
it's like,
Okay.
okay, what news source do I automatically believe just because it's the news source that's my news
Yeah.
source, right? you
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
um what is it that I'm just automatically leaning to and accepting as the right thing, as
Right.
compared to stepping back and saying, oh, is this the right thing? I think that type of that assumption is getting in the
Mm,
way of us being open, and just
mm.
simply turning the lens toward that and saying, oh, is this actually true? Or is this just me doing this because it feels comfortable and known?
Yeah. And especially today with political divisiveness and so much else happening, going back to schools, not going back to schools, do the schools open, do they not, kids home, going, I mean, the examples are endless from the times that we're living in literally right now. I think those are really, really great points, this idea of not being rigid and not sort of pushing back, and being open. And then this also concept of, what sort of preconceived notions or beliefs am I bringing to a situation, this tribal, what did you call it?
Tribal
Tribal philosophy,
psychology. Yeah.
tribal psychology.
Yeah. It's
Looking at
basically
groups
in
of
group, out
people.
group.
Yes, group sort of, dynamics, like you're either this or that, or I'm
Right.
guessing is that the concept. Very, very helpful, and I think it will help us all. And finally, just to close, before we close, you talked a lot about mindfulness, and we talked a little bit about empathy and healthcare workers, et cetera. Do you have any additional advice for physicians and medical staff who've been on the front lines of the crisis? You talked about mindfulness, and that anything else maybe to help some of our colleagues that feel burned out?
Well, I would say with that, just notice, take care of yourselves. It really starts,
Mm,
if we don't build a foundation for ourselves, we can't help anybody else. So,
that's true.
basic things that everybody knows, but I think it's worth repeating, like make sure
Sure.
you eat well, make sure,
Right.
limit yourself to one Pop-Tart a day or something. I'm kidding. Um, get sleep, get exercise when you can. But
Right.
importantly, throughout the day, even in our jobs, we can take a moment to take a beat and say, okay,
Yeah.
let me just take a couple of deep breaths, pay attention to this, calm down my physiology. That's going to help me. It's going to help my patients. It's going to help me not, bring anxiety in as a social contagion into my exam rooms with my
Sure.
next patient, or even on the phone if I'm doing telemedicine or something like that.
Right.
So just
Right.
taking a beat throughout the day, moments, 10 seconds, 15 seconds, 20 seconds, short mindfulness exercises can be really, really helpful here. And it's not like we need, we're like, I don't have time for this. I have time for 20 seconds, and the
Right.
payoff is much greater. That return on investment is huge.